Hi guys, welcome to another Folly of Starnet webcast.
So it's down to you and me again, Cynthia. You
I
know,
know. So
I'm
lonely.
gonna pull Chad up so that we can continue with this, and then I'm gonna step out and let you do your thing with your cosplay friends here, and I'll come back a bit later. So enjoy, and I'll see you when I come back.
Fantastic. Thank you. Oh, wow. That's such a nice setup.
How's it going?
Hello, Chad.
Hi.
Welcome. Thank you. Wow, that's an incredible setup. Holy cow.
We have fun.
Yeah. So, Chad, honestly, to our event guests, would you mind introducing your background in armor making and props, as well as, I mean, you've won at TwitchCon in the very first TwitchCon they've ever had. You've you've done work with Capcom games, I believe.
I've worked with quite a few game companies. I tend to work more with game companies than with movie companies, but I actually prefer that because I'm a pretty big gamer.
Yeah.
But if I could really describe who I am and kind of my foundation,
Yeah, that'd be wonderful.
Growing up, I grew up with a father that was incredibly crafty. He was a carpenter. He also did hot rods and custom like automotive body kind of car parts and just the whole nine yards. So I grew up working on classic cars, learning how to paint properly, learning how to work with Bondo, sanding. A lot of people don't realize it, but sanding is in fact an art form in and of itself. And so you take kind of that amalgamation of crafting skills that I was brought up with, and then you add a huge dose of nerdy, and you kind of have me. And so
I like that.
Yeah. So I grew up though, playing video games, and it was at one point that I realized, I really liked the concept of taking something from a virtual world or a fantasy world or a sci-fi world, and the process of bringing that to life. It's very rewarding, but it's incredibly fun. It's very much, I would say, an inclusive kind of mentality, because I want these things I love in video games and in books, and I'm a huge bookworm, by the way. But I want them to also be in my own reality itself. So that kind of led to who I was. But so when I started going to school, upper level education, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to school for video games. I had an opportunity to kind of learn 3D modeling a little bit younger. I had like a hand-me-down copy of 3D Studio Max or something.
Nice.
And started playing around with that. But, so that evolution occurred. And then my teacher at that time had said, hey, you know what, you really should consider going to school for more digital art. You're pretty good at this. But the thing about it is the video game industry is brutal on artists. And so after I had, so I was going to a school called Noman School of Visual Effects. You can enroll in one of their programs, but you can also just take the classes you wanted. And I've never had a desire to really do like traditional figure drawing or anything along that lines. It was very much about the digital art, very much about the 3D modeling. And so I took the classes I wanted. And I realized I'm not going to be happy. I'm not going to make a career out of this, right?
Yeah.
And so I went back to school for business. I was like, okay, fundamental understanding of business.
Yeah, that's smart.
Run a business, be management, or do management, learn about taxes, learn about trade, all that stuff. It'll help me no matter what I do, even if I'm just, flipping burgers or something, right?
Yeah, that's so smart.
So that was kind of the approach. Is I want to make sure whatever I'm investing my time in is something that's really going to help kind of as a whole bring me up and build my own capacity up. So during that time, though, my girlfriend at the time, she was a big fan of Dia de los Muertos. It's the Dead Festival. And there's a huge celebration out of that, of Dia de los Muertos out here in Los Angeles at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. So I was like, okay, well, I want to do something really cool, but I also don't really want to like have that weird cultural appropriation and people kind of misunderstand what I'm doing. But I do want to pay homage to it. And my girlfriend at the time had seen this really cool stormtrooper helmet design that had a bunch of like Day of the Dead kind of.
Oh yeah, I love that design.
And I was like, I think I can make that. So my dad now in his retired his kind of retirement, he's a pinstriper for a living. So he'll sit there and he'll just do these incredible, you know, kind of vector. It's almost like real life vector drawing, right?
Yeah, that's crazy.
He's a wizard. But yeah, so I was like, okay, Dad, I'll make the helmet. Do you think you can do these? So one thing to note about my dad though is my dad's a short little Hawaiian guy, right? He's very Polynesian, and so I gave him the helmet, and he did a bunch of really awesome designs, but it's more like a tribal Dia de los Muertos design, you know. It's very much like Polynesian tribal look to it. But it was
that's so cool.
That was the first prop I'd made though, and the thing about it, it was fiberglass. It was a stormtrooper helmet, and I hadn't really done any of the 3D printing at that point. So fast forward to modern day, the way that I work now is I work all in ZBrush and in Maya, mostly in ZBrush though. And the way that I will kind of start is I actually have digital scans of myself, of my fiance Sammy, who's the other half of Hoku Props. She's the Black Magician seamstress half.
I love it.
But what that does is that gives me a reference for dimensional accuracy. So ZBrush is really cool because it does in fact maintain dimensionality. And so anything that I make, as long as it's scaled properly from the very start, you might need to rescale. But anything that's set up in that fashion, I will be able to take directly from ZBrush, put it on the CNC router, put it on the 3D printer, put it on, you know, laser cutter, whatever it is that I'm utilizing or whatever I'm working with. So I definitely do a lot of laser cutting. I definitely do a lot of 3D printing. There's also a lot of CNC work, as you know, I saw some pictures yesterday. But
yeah, exactly. No, I saw you.
Why don't we, while we're talking about it, why don't we look at some of these photos that we've got here, right?
Well,
I'm going to bring those up for you.
I was going to say, I also can do this. So I actually can broadcast, you know, so this is a project I'm working on right now.
There we go. Cool. So yeah, so you
is,
just, okay.
So this is actually for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. There's a kid I'm doing a project for who, you know, he struggled, had a whole lot of things that he had to go through, and Make-A-Wish approached him and said, "Hey, we'd like to give you a wish." And his wish was Lich King armor from the World of Warcraft, and I think that is an immensely cool thing. So this is the girdle I've been working on, and so typically the way that this process would work is I'll see what kind of reference art is out there. I will try and find some sort of 3D model that's online, whether it's a game asset or something that just gives me the proportions. Because if I had one single suggestion for everybody that's starting to make armor, stop worrying so much about the fine details and instead worry about the silhouette, worry about the proportions, worry about the dimensionality to it. You can have all this beautiful filigree and whatnot, but let's say I'm judging a costume contest or something, and somebody walks in with this beautiful ornate costume, but all of the proportions are just wonky. It's not going to work out. It's not going to benefit you. Whereas if you are missing some details, but the absolute silhouette and the proportions are spot on, you're going to do far, far better. And so by taking the actual game models or whatever resources I can find and using that as reference, it will allow me to make sure that all of the different armor pieces and components, they flow together and they work together far better. Yeah, I don't know. But so that's kind of a starting process for me is, once again, it's find concept and find reference and make sure that you're working towards a goal that is going to really pay off. So I can pull up, here. So this is the actual reference that I found online, the statue. And so you can see the overall proportions on this statue that somebody had sculpted. It's really good. It fits the form well. There is one major problem with Warcraft universe, and that's that the shoulder pads and just the human figure as a whole is huge. Oh, come over here. No. Come on. No. They want to meet you. This is the other half of Hoku Props really quick. Come on in, Sammy. I'm literally You're fine. It's a tiny little screen. I don't care. Say hi. Just wave. Wave. Hi. I was doing chores. Okay. He's more important anyway. Alex says, "Let me see your face." But yeah, so with this in mind, I would be able to. And this is the other half. This is separate. I'll be able to actually extract this girdle. I will isolate it, and then I will start completely rebuilding a model around it. And as you guys saw a second ago, this is kind of what the results of that looks like as what's in progress.
Do you do that with all of your projects? Do you try to see if there's an existing 3D model and then pull from that or render over that, or do you?
I mean,
I usually start from scratch?
absolutely. So luckily enough, when you're working with a studio, they typically will have those assets available. Game studios will never send you the high res files. Never.
Oh, that's
Sometimes
true.
they'll send you the low res versions, and that's at least, like I said, that's somewhere to start from. That's somewhere to make sure that the proportions, because the big thing you want to do is make sure that what I'm giving them is also what they're kind of expecting to see, because it can be problematic if that's not the case. This is the shoulder pauldron.
Nice. That's so cool. And that's a finished model that you have rendered from that figure.
Yeah, this is all
so
my sculpt. This is
nice.
my work so far.
It's an incredible sculpt. Wow, I can't wait to see this project.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah.
I think that's what I've got up for you right here, right now.
No, that's
did
perfect.
Kiki make it in here?
Yeah, Kiki's here.
Yay, join me, Kiki.
Hey, yeah. So let me see.
Full screen.
Kiki. Okay, so yeah, we got an introduction to the workflow of Hoku props, and particularly Chad of Hoku props. Sammy, who's the seamstress, is running around with the puppy. Hi. So yeah, Kiki. Hi. Welcome.
Hi.
This past year's winner of TwitchCon, amazing freelance artist of Kannon Studios. Honestly, Kiki, do you mind introducing yourself to the audience as far as like, how did you get your start in props? I mean, it's kind of incredible that we have one prop maker from Riverside, California, and then right now we have one that's literally I think you're in Clearwater, Florida?
Yes.
Okay, yes. So we
have
not
where I started, but it's where I ended up.
Okay, got you. So yeah, just tell us about your journey for a second.
Yeah, I did listen to Hoku's story, and there were some similarities there with my path, and it was also kind of interesting to hear. But I started making costumes when I was really young in 2003, kind of before a lot of the anime and exploding and the photography. Yes. It was just kind of like, just went to, like a Star Trek convention, and you just wore your costume, and it was just pretty low key.
Yeah. It was
that's kind of how I started. It was just like a fun little thing. And I just kind of always kept doing that through my life. But I actually went to school for animation to be an animator.
Okay.
And learning like 3D and 2D animation and all these different elements and things like that. And I got to a point when I graduated, I think just school and just learning it just felt like it wasn't maybe right. And I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And then I got really inspired by prop making, specifically by Volpin. I saw some of the stuff he was doing, and I thought, wow, that's really cool. I lived in like the Midwest, so the culture there was really behind everything else. Everybody else was exploding with all these other things in like Texas and California and Florida, and I was like, wow, all that stuff's really cool. Like, how does he do any of that? Like, all of it's super unknown to me, like molds and everything, and I just kind of just started playing around with it when I moved to Florida, because I had access to, smooth on products and advanced materials. And I was like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm just going to buy stuff and just try it, which is just kind of been my whole life with costuming. I didn't really get trained in making costumes and props. I actually got trained in something completely different, but I was, why not? So I just kind of dabble in various things and just see what I can learn. And I've always just kind of had a artistic history, so for me it was just another thing that was fun that just kind of further developed into being a studio where I sell stuff.
Yeah, and it's just really funny because your journey, and you say that you dabbled and this is kind of where you ended up. I think that's really honestly 90% of makers, that's honestly their origin story, where they're kind of like, I think I want to do this in school, but then they realize I actually really like this hobby, like this is really keeping my interest right now, so I'm going to develop that more, because that's really genuinely where I want to spend most of my hours on. So I think that's incredible. Let me see if I can get Nick, are you there with the maybe the presentation with the images? Let me see. Oh, there it is. Yay. Okay, so it looks like, we'll start with Kiki. So this was your winning costume at TwitchCon.
Yeah,
and
that was.
Yeah, so we're going to start. I think that this is amazing. I see there's a lot of elements such as laser cutting and mold making and sculpting. And so let me see if I can go to the next image so we can kind of start to see what the process for your, so is this vacuum forming?
It is.
Yeah, okay. So tell us about, So how did you essentially start to utilize vacuum forming into your work? Like, where did that process come from?
So vacuum forming was kind of before the Ava foam Warbler era. And this is kind of early on, and I wanted to make this clean armor. So this costume was made later in my life, but it's interesting because I feel like every time I hit like a low point in my life, I kind of go to art. So when I learned vacuum forming, it was kind of like at a low point, and it helped me be excited about something new. So I found online that's, you could just make your own vacuum form. And the plastic is really cheap, and you could buy a roll. I found this industrial place where I could just get a roll, like a large roll for like $50 or whatever, and I could just make the vacuum form fairly inexpensively. And it was just a skill that I kind of just picked up and just said, well, why not? I'm going to just try to do this at home because, I thought you get a nice kind of clean look and things like that. And it was something new. And I think this is when a lot of creators were trying to find different materials to use. But
definitely. What year was this that you completed this costume?
This was more of a recent costume.
Oh,
I
okay.
picked up the skill in the past, which I think the costumes later in there. But I think I made this a few years ago, maybe 3 years ago, with combinations of foam mats and vacuum forming. So it's just a few different elements that I kind of put together, which is materials that anyone could just buy at the store and pick up and do readily available. And I just kind of use sculpting to make my pieces. And vacuum forming is essentially where you create a frame and you seal your plastic in there and you kind of, well, this is how I do it. It's probably not recommended to eat out of the same oven that I do it in, but I'm just going to throw that out there.
It's okay.
Safe, but I don't worry. The oven until it gets to a certain melting point. And then you have to kind of quickly put it over it, and then it's connected to a shot vac, so it sucks all the air out. So then essentially you get that form. It's a little bit of trial and error. There's a lot of other new materials now, but it's something that I still like to revisit because I think it's just part of my past. So I'm kind of I slowly became like a mixed media creator, and everything I've learned throughout the 15 years or whatever I've been making stuff, I like to kind of make little hints on my history of what I've learned just throughout my journey.
That's amazing. And so the next image, is that also vacuum forming as well, or no? Is this just a free foam?
Vacuum forming? Well, a little bit of it is, but a lot of it's just kind of free form, just heating up ABS plastic over edges and stuff like that.
ABS.
So it's kind of like styrene. I use either styrene or ABS. Styrene's a nice soft plastic, and it's really, really cheap.
Yeah.
So it's not really expensive. The only form part is on the arm part, and it didn't vacuum form that. That is another trick. Again, not super safe. But essentially what you can do is I wrap my arm, and once I get my piece, my pattern, I'll heat it up, and then I'll slowly put it over my arm and heat and manipulate it. If it's obviously coated to where it's not too hot. If you had a form to heat it on that was exactly your size, if you made a mold of it, that'd be obviously safer. But it's just something quick that I just kind of learned early on before there's a lot of easier materials. I think it's really great for some things. It's not always, it can't always be as organic. You can only do so much with it based on the melting point and manipulate it. But things like stormtrooper outfits and things like that, or vacuum formed in plastic is more rigid, but it's very durable and it holds up. So it just depends on what you want to do. But I still think you can get some pretty cool things out of it. It's a really inexpensive material.
Definitely. And so now it seems like we've segued away from the ABS and styrene to Warbler. So which one did you experiment with first? Did you do the styrene and then Warbler, or did you go back?
Yeah, Warbler didn't exist when I started vacuum forming. So there wasn't a lot of options to make armor at the time. But it's something I still use sometimes. So this was my first time ever working with silicone or anything like this. I kind of went big for my first project. So this was a point in my time where I lived in this, again, I feel like at low points in my life, I make something, I wanted so I lived in a little apartment. I didn't really have a lot of money, and I just wanted to create something. And I was like, I want to do something big that I've never done before. And a lot of the stuff that they're doing in Face Off, where they're making silicone bodysuits and stuff, and it's really interesting. so I did like a plaster cast of my body, and then I sculpted with just a cheaper clay. I didn't have more expensive clay, but and then I did molds to do this full kind of like silicone dragon skin suit to kind of mimic an exaggerated anime figure.
That's so cool.
And people always tell me, you know, like, oh, I don't have the space to do that, you know, because they see like my workshop now, and I'm like, yeah, but I think that you can't let that hold you back. You can make space, because like my apartment was like this little 1-bedroom, and everything kind of had materials and stuff in it. It's kind of a workshop, but I sleep in this room kind of thing.
Yes.
And but I don't know. It was just so much fun that it didn't really matter to me to have like necessarily a dining room or anything. I didn't really care. I just thought I just want to make something, you know?
Yeah,
and
it's amazing. Yeah, and that's the thing. I think a lot of people, you're right, like they get too hung up on the fact that, you know, it's like, oh, my apartment's too small to do that. And I'm like, no, it's not. Like I used to live in the same situation you did, little 1-bedroom, but you know, you can still pump out some pretty cool stuff. I mean, yeah, I think it's incredible. And now, so this is dragon skinned. The final product is dragon skin. Like, okay, that's amazing. I love it so much.
Like basically a plaster and then a plaster cast to get the body, and then clay, and then I did like a shell shock shell, and then I did oh my god, I mix up the names so much. I forget what the outer stuff is. Plastic paste. Plastic paste. I always get that confused. Plastic paste. They have better material now because it's a little jagged and whatnot. Now they have this foam stuff. I like it more.
Yeah, it's incredible. So yeah, oh, and here's the other pieces of the armor. And now those are exclusively Warbler that you've done for all the detail pieces. Cool.
The armor is the Warbler, and then the dragon itself is just the back of the silicone versus the reference image.
Yeah, that's incredible. And then I think it's let me see. Let's go to the next image if you don't mind, Nick. Oh, cool. And this is actually segueing right into your TwitchCon project.
Yeah.
So I see there is a lot of mold making here. So can you tell us a little bit more about that process of getting that gauntlet together?
So it's kind of like my Kolf Taroth, like my Winnie costume, was kind of like everything that I learned for the most part. I mean, there's some, obviously not everything, but a lot of it into one costume.
Yeah.
I've tried to add my history, basically. My history as a creator. I created this costume, which is a representation of just pretty much me throughout the years. So I came up with, you know, the idea when I did Shime, where I did the silicone suit, I came up with the idea that the armor on my arms, I'm a very small person, and so it's a challenge to not look too bulky. And originally I tried chainmail, try something new, and it was just going to be, I had to scrap it in the end. It was just going to be too bulky for my size. I'm only like 4'11", so I'm a very small person. So I decided to incorporate using the dragon skin silicone for the armor on the arm, because it's just really, really flexible. The challenge was getting everything to kind of match as far as armor, because the elbow is kind of casted resin pieces, the arm is silicone, and then the fingers are actually Ava foam. So there's 3 different materials that I blended to try to look similar to one material. And the process is very much the same as the silicone suit, where I sculpted my item for like the elbow piece. Originally, you can see I did it. I patterned it out, did it out of foam, and then I kind of changed my mind and decided I'm going to do resin casting.
Yeah, that's incredible.
A silicone to mold it. I specifically work with Smooth On products, but I just layered the silicone over it and then the shell, and then you just can kind of rotocast the resin around in there to get kind of your shell.
Nice. That's incredible. Wow, that's like just, I guess your variety of techniques is pretty incredible. Oh, look at that face! Look at you crying with your little trophy. You're so happy.
How good did you have one, or were you just?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's incredible.
I have one of those. It's right there.
Yeah, there you go. See, look. I know it's like really incredible to have both of you together because of the connection. But yeah, so this is also. I see the original relief of the roses. This one I'm really curious about. So you have the original relief of the roses, and tell me about how you formed it into those the armor.
Right. So this was a little trickier because this is sort of when I made Kolf Taroth, is sort of when I got back into 3D stuff. And I haven't done a lot of 3D modeling, not as much as Hoku.
Yeah.
So we're a little newer. I mean, I did learn it in college, but I specifically learned Maya in college. And Maya is
very,
trippy.
very different now.
and I kind of forgot all of it. It's not like if I go into a program, you kind of get the gist of it, right? When you're used to working with programs, but Maya's just kind of a beast, to be honest. And they threw a lot at me because it's a big program.
Yeah.
So the roses were 3D modeled in Blender, and then I took the file and I CNC'd out a board so that I could roll the clay into the roses. So the roses were 3D modeled kind of after the armor.
That is so cool.
And then I pulled them out and I kind of shaped them and kind of put them into shape a little bit more and smooth them out, or refine them a little bit so that it would be really uniformed.
Incredible. Yeah.
So I guess it's just something I kind of, again, was just accumulative based on my history.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. Like, I don't know, your techniques were, like I said, I can see why you are both best in show winners at TwitchCon. Just like the sheer variety of techniques that you infuse, because it's not exclusively like, I think that sometimes when I'm judging a costume, that's what I pay most attention to. It's like it's not exclusively like sewing based or armor based, but when you can really find different ways and different techniques that people really haven't utilized before, that's really like A++ for points. So. And then this, I see. So more roses that you did the rolling sculpt. Yeah,
so the scales were kind of a similar technique where I made kind of a silicone slab. Like I CNC'd out a board of the scales. And then I made a silicone roll that I could just put the dragon skin in and peel it up and then cut out my patterns. And then airbrush them and try to match the paint.
Nice. That's incredible. Yeah, the airbrushing is really nice. Is there a particular paint you use? Because I see it's like almost a color shift. Or am I wrong?
You're not wrong. Yes. So for some of it I did. With silicone, it's tricky. You have to use kind of psycho paint that will adhere to it. What I did was I added in kind of color shift paints to it and tried to make it work so that it would still adhere to it. And then I used the same color shift paint on the resins.
So you just put the paint in a silicone kind of medium. It was a medium. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. That's amazing. I love it so much. That's an amazing process on your paints. It looks like in the next image. Let me see. Oh, cool. So this is more Warbler work.
Foam.
Oh, foam based. Oh, so this is exclusively foam. This isn't even Warbler, correct?
Yeah. So I didn't really work. I work with foam every once in a while, but I don't really say. I mean, I don't really feel like I work with anything a lot, but it's. Yeah. I really tried to push my painting for this project specifically, and I had to kind of paint it a few times to where I felt like this is kind of the goal. But just getting cheap craft foam, for example, like this is just a roll of craft foam that I got at the craft store, and Ava foam or thicker foams that getting a painting technique down was a little tricky, but I didn't have any special brushes or paints. The paints I use are the same cheap paint at the craft store. The brushes I use are just the cheap little craft brushes.
Amazing.
I didn't really do anything special besides just try different things. I didn't airbrush this specifically at all. It was actually just all hand painted.
That's incredible. I mean, it's really nice to see you have so many amazing big and very complicated processes, but literally like this is honestly where most cosplayers would start, right here with foam and just your basic craft paint. Like, so I think it's really incredible to see like, hey guys, this is where you can segue into these crazy, amazing builds that Kiki does. So let me see. Yeah, and so I think we have the last image, and this is
So this is actually the first vacuum form that I had mentioned.
Oh, okay.
So
cool.
This is kind of quite a while ago. I would say that this has been like 9 years ago at this point, if not more.
Amazing.
And it was kind of like a dark time in my life. I didn't have anywhere to live. I was living in someone's basement. Everything was kind of going downhill.
Oh no.
And not that I wasn't working, but like when you're in a bad place, I think you have to find something to kind of relieve you mentally,
Definitely.
And so this costume while I was working on it, while I was going through a hard time, kind of helped me through it and learning something new. And that's how I got into vacuum forming and making this vacuum form. There was really limited things of armor at the time. And it was probably just, I didn't know the resources or where to find things. This is what I was able to find at the time. And it was just something that I think, even though the costume is old and I feel like I can make something better, there's still a connection to it that's still kind of in my past and my history of like where I've came.
Definitely. I think it's amazing how you always bring up the fact that, once again, I think anytime you kind of feel like in a rut, it's really the motivation to essentially push yourself and explore something that does make you happy. It makes you excited to like wake up every day. Because honestly, especially right now when, you know, we don't have cons and COVID and things like that, I think a lot of people really need, I mean, honestly, it's that same situation. They need something to really get them excited to wake up every day. And so back you for me.
I think there's an additional thing there too, and that's that people who are creative need to create. You know, there was a period of time when I went sailing and I learned a new set of things, and I put myself in a new place, and I was sailing around the Caribbean. It was something I'd never done before. But ultimately, given a certain period of time, there's something eating at you that, you know, you've got to go and make something. You've just got to get out there and do it. And what's nice about our two guests here is that they clearly go about it in entirely different ways. So we're going to see, you know, how what Chad is doing, you know, is incorporating a lot. It seems to be incorporating a lot of digital form. And what Kiki is doing is more, you know, my background of making molds and sculpting and working with other things. I think what I've taken from you know, Kiki's images really is the adaptability of taking one technique that you learned to do one job with, and then realizing that you can use that, you know, to do something else. You know, that actually. Just for example, you could take something, you know, offline or even 3D print, and then physically take a mold off of that, and then physically do a squeeze into that mold in a sculptable material, which you could then wrap around something else and sculpt and remold and turn into something else again. I see that in Kiki's forms here, that she's really taking many different concepts, but she's applying them through different techniques that pass through her life along the way. In my book, I often say, you know, you don't actually know when you learn something, always know how you're going to use it. It's a tool. You put it in this toolbox, and it you know, it takes you onto other places. Just like we're about to move on to Chad's photos and see where we go with that. But hopefully we'll have time to come back for a group you know, conversation.
You know, I want to add something really quick though, Nick.
Of course.
What's so interesting about what you just said is for so long, you know, there was a major kind of artistic disconnect, I would say, with a lot of the digital process, especially sculpting. And what's so ironic is you're discussing taking, you know, assets, whether it's a greebly or it's a 3D print or just some sort of found object, and then molding it and then modifying it from there, resculpting it. And what's so nifty about that workflow is the complete opposite process is now also something that we can do though with 3D scanning. For example, I could have you actually sculpt something in a clay form that I could then scan, pull into digital, and then go and rework it from that process. And it's so nice because the process until recently was not seamless. And I would say now it's really starting to bridge that gap. You know what I mean? And I think that's incredibly exciting.
The issue over 3D printing, though, from my experience, has been really to do with the texturing, that that you can get your form, but ultimately, because of the process, the way that you know, your form is then printed out, you've got ribs and lines and other things, and you never really get, you know, when I'm sculpting something in clay, you know, I go all the way down to the skin tone. And pull that out in the mold, which to my experience, you haven't yet been able to do.
Oh, you've got to see some of those new printers, man. They go down to 5 micron layer height.
Yeah.
Well,
you know, so I'm in the Caribbean. I don't have access to that. So
I understand, but it's that I think you can understand just you identifying what the issue has been for so long, and now you probably see why I'm so excited is because the major constraints that we always faced, which was that layer step height, it's something that is actually being phased out incredibly rapidly.
Right.
So
cool.
Yes. Okay.
That's
yes,
cool.
this is me.
So let's move on to your photos and see where we go with.
All right. So yeah, so right now we have, of course, your big showcase piece that you won at the very first TwitchCon ever. I mean, yeah, a monster, because like the sheer scale of it is like I can't even fathom it, to be honest. I'm honestly Kiki's height. I'm only 5 feet.
I'm not that much higher. I promise I'm not that high.
Everyone's high.
Really? Oh my god,
I'm slightly taller. I'm 5'10", but considering this costume, you know, from
like
head
7.
to toe is literally 8 foot tall. I actually messed up on the scaling of this costume. I don't know if I messed up or if I just made a judgment call and I don't remember it. But the first thing that we really did with this costume was try to go, okay, is it even something possible? And so for me, you know, one of the biggest points of failure, the biggest kind of deciding factors when I'm working on a costume for myself is, am I going to be able to walk in the thing? And so the first piece that we made on this costume was actually the feet, and then trying to figure out whether it was going to be stilts or, you know, where I was going to fit in it. And of course, I picked legitimately the most difficult Reinhardt you could pick, which is because his head is visible. So I couldn't just fake it and have my head kind of in the torso with a little window. I had to be all the way up there. And that kind of brings forth some issues. But at the same time, it also, if you can kind of overcome those obstacles, specifically just the height. So it's specifically, it's trying to get up. For me, it's 18 inches of lift. And then also for the arms to be at full extension, it's an additional, I think, 15 inches on my arm.
Wow.
So figuring out how to do that, you know, we started making the feet, like I said, and figuring out scaling on that. I think I made like 3 different feet. But it was at that point where I was like, okay, I think this is going to work. But I had to figure out where I was then going to be inside of them. And so I think what I ended up doing was actually I took a picture of myself kind of in that traditional T-pose. And then I superimposed it over a picture of Reinhardt, and I scaled Reinhardt. So my feet would be perfectly in line with his kneecaps, and then also, or his knee joints, and then also where his elbow joints were going to be, because I wanted to actually utilize my wrists as his elbows essentially, and then also utilize my ankles as his knees. So we ended up going with drywall stilts that I ended up kind of just reinforcing and then making some kind of simple adjustments to, including tightening all the bolts because they weren't all tight. And what's so cool about drywall stilts, though, is when you actually bend your ankles, they will actually kind of pivot and articulate similar to a leg itself. It reproduces that same motion. So when I'm walking around in this costume, I have functioning ankle joints on his ankles. I've got my knees, or my ankles are his knees. I can actually bend at his waist, which is pretty much where my waist is, perfectly. And then the same process follows through all the way down to his arms. The arms are rigged up like puppet arms. So we actually we took a pair of football shoulder pads and then mounted an aluminum actual kind of boom arm off of both sides. So the arms are actually suspended off of that. And then you've got more aluminum tubing coming down. And that's where I've actually got several different series of joints. One is kind of like a rotational joint that allows the kind of this motion. And then one is actually where the elbow joint is. And then I've got handles that stick out of the back of that. And so I can actually kind of direct and puppet arms. They're huge puppet arms. It's literally, it's like having a Muppet, you know, just running around, but
that's incredible.
Now that is kind of the general engineering that went into it. You know, the costume for me, I think Kiki and I actually probably did as well as we did in the contest, because we approached it with a similar process, which is, even though I was larger than life, I didn't just make a larger than life costume. We did special effects. Yeah, we did seamstress work or sewing. Yeah. We did armor. We did, you know, I did the larger than life. I've got you beat on that one, Kiki.
I'm never going to be larger than life.
You never know. But yeah, so it was that kind of amalgamation of different techniques and that mixed media, so to speak, I think is what really set it apart. And I'd say that's something that sets a lot of costumes apart, though, is having more than just one kind of element to it. Right. So my, you know, I've discussed kind of the engineering that went into designing the costume, but the reason why I did all of that, not just myself, I had a couple of others helping me as well. But the reason why we put so much into that is I wanted to reproduce natural human movement. You know what I mean? When I waved, I wanted my arm to kind of flex and be able to do that. Because if you look at a lot of the larger than life costumes, they're kind of like Frankenstein, where the arms are fixed. And so you've got like this single ball joint where the shoulder is. But then other than that, it's always fixed. And that doesn't look good. It really doesn't. The same can be said with the legs. So that was what really went into it. And I think we actually sacrificed the overall finish of the costume. I look at the costume and I still cringe at times because I'm like, oh no, I could have done it so much better. But I can't second guess all of the decisions we made back at that point in time, because obviously it paid off. And that major decision that took so much additional time, though, was in fact prioritizing motion and movement. So the costume, that you can't see some of what's going on here. There's a lot of electronics, a lot of lights. The whole thing glows. It's beautiful. I think you might have a picture of it when it's glowing. But
yeah, we do the next one, or no?
You can see the one with Sammy. The next, image 45 it's got Sammy. You can see like the mouth lighting up and stuff.
Oh, there you go. There we go. Yes, there's.
So one thing, there was smoke. So he's got this rocket pack, and we took apart a bunch of vapes and made like a vape system.
Yes.
And it only really ever worked properly once. And so the day of the contest, before prejudging, we had left it running. So it was on a microcontroller. So it would turn on for 15 seconds, turn off for 10 seconds, and cycle that over and over.
That's
so
smart.
It wouldn't burn it out, right?
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
The thing had been running for probably like an hour and a half. So we go into prejudging, and then I had a button that would turn on a fan. There was a little flap that would open up and allow all the actual like built up vapor to release.
That's so smart.
The only time it worked, but boom, brr, and everyone's excited about it. So
that's funny.
That was a very fun effect.
Yeah.
The costume itself is it's actually multiple different elements. This is actually mostly not 3D printed. The majority of it is built out of EVA foam and vacuum forming. I actually have a video. If you make me full screen really quick, I can show you a video of the vacuum forming process.
Sure. Yeah, you can do a screen.
There. Or I'll just switch like I did before. So these are bucks. These are actually the belt buckles, and then some of the accessory pieces. So this costume has multiple kind of repetitive components. And so that's where vacuum forming really is beneficial, because I can just do multiple pulls off of the same bucks. And then so we're going to actually have you can see. So this is a very malleable heated up plastic. And then what it's doing is it's actually evacuating all of that air. And that's what's creating this reproduction of that surface while it's still being hollow.
Perfect. And now, which plastic type are you using on this? The styrene or no?
Yeah, so the vacuum forming on this was styrene, and that's simply just for cost. But if I actually had to pick a material that I prefer, it's PETG.
Yes.
So PETG is my favorite material to work with when we're doing vacuum forming, because it has the same qualities of ABS. It's not brittle and fragile. It'll stretch. Yeah. It has a bit of give. Styrene, it's very brittle. So it'll if you get a little cut, it'll just tear the whole way and starts falling apart and splitting. So those pieces there were styrene, though, just like I said, for cost. Actually, Kiki, I was going to tell you one fun thing is you should try vacuum forming for your mother mold. So if you take your master after you've got your rubber mold, if it's a brush on, you just vacuum form over it, instant mother mold.
There you go. That's actually
save a little bit of time. So we did a lot of vacuum forming, but the overall patterning was all derived from 3D models. So we actually ripped the game models for Lionheart. And then once again, I went through and resculpted and made my own models from that reference, and then unfolded all of that. So in 3D modeling, when you're going to texture paint, it's actually a flat image. If anybody's looked at game files before, it's typically a flat image. And the way that you do that will actually be to unfold, similar to patterning with seamstress work, but you'll unfold your 3D model into a flat pattern that has corresponding reference points, and then you'll paint that in something like Photoshop. This is old school 3D modeling days. But so utilizing that same UV software for unfolding the model, I actually used that to make all of my my patterns, because the software I use is called UV Layout, and it's an algorithmic process, and so it'll look for pressure and tension on the surface of that model. It kind of jitters around until it's a nice even unfold, and then you can do like relief cuts and stuff. But like I said, it's very much more on the technical side of it. I wish I was more equipped to use these for sculpting, but I'm clearly not.
I got you. No, that's incredible. Oh my gosh. I guess it just blows me away, because once again, I come from a seamstress background. That's my definitely my training and forte. So yeah, but it's just, that's kind of why it's so fascinating black magic. But I think that's why it's so fascinating for me to talk to each of you about your process with hard goods, is that only through like my current job and profession am I starting to kind of really understand hard goods, materials, processes. So it's just so fascinating. So especially, but yes, Chad, so after talking about your vacuum form process, so yeah, I guess, and You know, let's jump right back into this one, Uther.
This is Uther. Yeah.
He's got a lot of as opposed to Reinhardt, he's got a lot of very detailed areas, such as the shoulder eagle, the cape clasp. Is there a different process used for that, or is that just 3D printing again, like 3D modeling and printing, or did you use mold making? Because I know you don't really use mold making that much.
I actually do tons of molding. It's just
you do?
It's more for the actual like commission jobs. If it's just for me, if I'm doing one copy, I don't make a mold unless I absolutely have to. And that's because silicone's messy.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's super messy. So and the kind of evolution of resin printers and 3D printers and all that has really, really alleviated a lot of the necessity for that when you're doing just prototyping and individual production. So almost all of the armor on this it's all 3D printed. So as I stated at the start, you know, I've got a 3D scan of my body that's dimensionally accurate.
Incredible.
And it's taking that body. Actually, here we go. Boom, I can do this again.
Have you ever
I have my body here if you guys want to see the goods.
There you go. Yeah, that's exactly that's why.
So there's a 3D scan of my torso that's been cleaned up to not show off quite as many goods. And it's utilizing this, you can quite frankly also ZBrush and 3D modeling is cheating because you have symmetry, you have a button. So what I can actually do is just start drawing the shape of something and very, very, very rapidly take this into a sculptable prototype by using what's called an extract function. And so it's literally something like this. I'm not going to go too far into detail, but essentially, you know, there's a 3D model that's now sculptable and refinable. And the process of cleaning this up and starting to sculpt it, keep in mind, this is guaranteed to fit my actual body type. You know what I mean? And so it really does facilitate being able to take a design and then form it around something that is meant to fit a specific person. And that's something that I think is immensely beneficial when you've got that reference, like I said, of being able to fit something in real time and simulate it without having to produce it. And that's something that's so important for me. You know, all these materials, they're all so expensive, and I can't really afford to just hope that things work out at times.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I've done that process. I've wasted enough money and enough of my time trying to hope that things work. And so this process for me is really that it's got a major safety net. But also keep in mind, let's say you've got a full suit of armor. So like, here's the Lich King. I can actually simulate the motion on this costume. I can see if there's going to be any points that are actually conflicting. I can see if there's, you know, going to be armor that's binding. And you know, here's a good example. Armor that goes around your legs, the back of your knee. How many times have you made something that just jams right into the back of your leg and you're like, oh gosh, this is
everyone all the time.
The con just started. Oh no, right? And so once again, it's kind of taking that initiative process and being able to simulate it. It gives you far better results. Keep in mind also sometimes though, is I don't actually have access to the person. So you know, whether it's creating a digital mannequin, there's a cool website. I think it's makehuman.net or .org. It'll allow you to plug in all of your actual measurements on a person's form. And it'll give you a pretty close approximation to that, which once again, bring into.
I might need to write that down.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm literally
guys, literally all I'm essentially doing is Twitch streaming, but on this platform right now. So this process, you guys can always find me on Twitch if you have questions. But yeah, so I think you guys already can see just the kind of benefits of working in this process over necessarily, you know, if I were to try and do something in another format. Yes.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Have you ever thought about, and because you have the digital body scan, have you ever found a need, or maybe Sammy has found a need to make a 3D print mannequin of herself for her sewing projects if she wants something super tailored?
So we've discussed it, and you know, the only problem with doing something like that is the fact that, well, mannequins come apart. You know what I mean? And so printing out of a rigid material, I would have to actually design it so it would be able to take apart and whatnot. So she's happy with her dress form. If she ever wants to do that, I will. I will say though, however, I have 3D printed my head, and it is a phenomenal wig head.
I saw that.
I also though, so I modified my head and I turned it into a cookie jar because you know my mother had kept saying, I miss your face.
Oh
So
my
I
God.
gave her my face for Christmas once, and it was
Cookie jar.
she now anytime like mail that's meant for me gets sent to her house, she'll just put my mail in my head.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. No, that is actually, that's hilarious. I love it. That's incredible. Oh my God. And now I have a question for showing your process on ZBrush and the way that you isolated essentially like patterns. And
Sure.
is that something that can, for our seamstress audience, is that something that can be applied to sewing in a sense where you're just isolating the shape and then you can literally just export that as, you know, a flat pattern?
So being a seamstress, you'll appreciate this process. But so there's been many times. So for example, on Sammy's Alaria costume, I don't know if you want to pull it up.
Oh yeah, let's pull that up. Nick, I think in chat.
It's the armored costume. It's like Frosty in the background.
Oh yeah, the front, down.
That one might be in there. Otherwise, I'll pull it up.
Okay, I think it's down in like the last few images. Yeah,
there you go.
There it is.
So
Thank
52.
you so much.
Image
oh
52.
wait, 52. Sorry, Nick. The other Frosty image. There she is.
You can kind of see it here, but that is a very fitted leather corset that she made. And the way we made it is actually almost identical to what you just saw me do really quickly. Is we drew out the shape in there, I extracted it, unfolded it, and like I said, it's dimensionally accurate, but it maintains all of those proportions. But you know, with seamstressing, creating that complex curvature to make sure that your actual you know, your fabric is pulling and curving, it reproduces that perfectly. So I can also export a vector though. So we actually just designed that in ZBrush, extracted it, unfolded it, tossed it on the laser cutter. I handed her, I said, "Here's sew this," and she's like, "Ta-da, done." It doesn't have boning or anything in it, but she had a corset underneath that to give it all the structure.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's fascinating. Gosh, I've only recently heard about Make Human as a resource from like 3D printing websites and things like that, as far as like scaling, let's just say scaling Iron Man armor or Stormtroopers to different body types. So I think it's really fascinating to actually finally see it in action. And wow, gosh, yeah. Like literally, I think I'm just blown away and speechless by your process because it's so different than what I do. Because when coming from like a studio art background and always being hands-on and very tactile, similar to Nick and his process, I think it's just so fascinating to see the opposite of that, or the exact stream of that, where it's exclusively digital and then pulling from that, and then I don't know, it's always. So I don't know. It just blows my mind because I'm just not essentially a digitally minded person. It's something that I actually have to learn versus something that's hands-on and tactile, which actually makes more sense to me because I can feel the process as opposed to just, I guess, But but it's amazing.
I think one of the things that Chad said earlier on, rings home too for people who are on a budget, that working with stuff that is digital and doing as much as you can does save you on wasted materials. And so I can see the sense of that. I'm not sure that when I work with, I'm not working with digital in the same programs or the same things. I might work with digital on photo imaging and various other things. But, one of the things, though, is, spending so much time with the computer does also, lead you to eye strain and other elements as well. So you got to try and, balance that out. I can definitely see advantages in actually trying to get full printouts of your body shape and body size to be able to move things on, because in the same way with prosthetics, we would make pieces on a life cast, which would give us the form. But then in making them in multiple pieces, the whole purpose of that was because of the shrinkage or whatever with the materials, that it made you then be able to, even though you'd sculpted it on the actual form, because of the shrinkage, it wasn't necessarily going to be a perfect fit anymore. And so consequently, you take sections of it and would then fit it to the person to make sure that he didn't cut into the back of the knees or didn't do those other things. And it does make me wonder, with not knowing your the digital printing the way that Chad does, or maybe the rest of you do, it does make me question a couple of issues there, which is about, do none of these 3D printed materials have shrinkage, and also
they all do. They all do.
Yeah, exactly. And to what extent are we able to print stuff that's really flexible? Because I find that interesting in terms of, when do we reach the point where you can 3D print your prosthetics, and
We're getting to that point. Yeah, Chad's about to say something.
Yeah, I try to find it really quick, but I can't find the file. So I did a Cable costume a couple of years back. It was from the new Deadpool movie, and he's got all of this just kind of the bioorganic virus that is turning him into a robot, essentially, right? And so I didn't want to try and 3D print flexible materials. What I wanted to do is I wanted to actually create a negative to actually print a mold. And so what I did is I can account, luckily enough, in digital software, the actual shrinkage amount and scale proportionate based off of that. I do a lot of work with a metal foundry, so I have to be spot on with accounting for expansion and shrinkage based off of the material type. And so what I ended up doing is I took my head that you guys just saw, and I sculpted on another item all of the actual kind of like mechanical prosthetic that I wanted it to be at the end. And then taking all of those, I literally put a box overlapping all of that, and I used a difference operation. So what it did is it carved away on that box, the side of my head, as well as the actual sculpt. And I had a negative mold, which I then could add registration keys to, and then add the inverse of that, which was my neck. And then I even made sprue holes and vents in that print. And then I injected silicone into there. And then utilizing that process, I was able to actually create a silicone prosthetic simply through. This was all just for proof of concept. Also,
but it's interesting. It's an interesting concept. In the same way, one of the issues that we have with foam latex, which people might think of as being old-fashioned, but has the advantage over silicone that it is much more lightweight. When you're, for example, if you're making a puppet, the whole thing, including the costume, needs to end up at about 3 pounds. And so you still, going back to foam latex, still can work. But it's kind of interesting what I'm seeing from this conversation. One of the issues with foam latex is it shrinks about 8%, and so you always have this issue of either trying to re-expand it or to make something. So the idea of being actually able to either make molds that were 8% larger, or make or even make a former that you sculpt on that is 8% larger. Like, for example, if I'm going to make prosthetics to fit Cynthia's face, if we could scan her head and make it 8% larger, I could scan the prosthetics on it, and after they'd shrunk, they'd fit her head. So I can see how that would be useful.
I did want to add, I've spoken during this webinar now a lot about digital process, but let me say my major kind of goal with everything we do is not to try and sell everybody on just doing work digitally, because digitally is really only half of the process. The best thing that I think everybody can really do is to learn the entire process as much as you can, because there are certain processes that are far more correct in use for the specific application. And so I'm still in the workshop downstairs nonstop, juggling, because it's like I'll sculpt and do something like rapid prototype in 3D, but then it's on the printer, and the benefit for that is I have a second pair of hands working that I don't have to do anything other than feed electricity into while I'm actually sanding and doing all the prep work. And thank goodness for products like catalyzed urethane primers and all that, because those are really my life.
but there's also, and I hate to sound like I'm being converted here, because I like hands-on stuff. But
my job is to get you excited, though.
Exactly.
I can also see how you could you make your, figure your thing out in 3D, then take the negative format to pull out a mold for it, and then to squeeze a sculptable form into that mold to pull it out and then texture it and finish it.
Oh,
and,
sure. Yeah, just heat up some monster
right.
clay.
So you yeah, exactly.
Great.
So, is there anything else on the photos that we need to go back to that we missed out for you, Chad?
Yeah, Chad.
Honestly, I think we covered me. I would much rather us all just chat and have fun if that's where we're at.
Yeah, well, that's cool. That seems right to me.
Yeah, definitely.
One of the things you were talking about, by the way, when you're talking about that first figure, where you were talking about your hands being in the elbows and your feet being in the knees, that's actually the same basis as the as what we did for the Wampa in Empire Strikes Back in 1979. That was actually exactly the same, only that was 10 feet tall instead of 8 feet tall.
Oh man, I don't.
Which actually was completely and utterly impractical, and because once again, weight was a problem with that.
Sure.
It's all well and good to say, oh well, we'll work it out. I had to make I had to spring load the elbows so that the arms would come up, because the arms had been made and they were too heavy, and so the guy inside couldn't lift them with his wrists. They didn't have the strength.
We did the exact same thing. We took bungee cords and we actually twisted them so they would kind of collapse on themselves. The thought process was, okay, so doing a curl is very difficult compared to our ability naturally to do a press. And so if the arm's resting state is upright, then it's more like a press than it is an actual curl. And so we used that exact same process, going from the shoulder down into the middle of the forearm through a little pulley. And so that actually retracted it as much as it could. And that is literally the only reason why I was able to get those things up, because while they were only probably 5 pounds, oh man, the amount of just leverage.
Well, leverage makes them heavier, right? Yeah, what I did was the opposite. I used the push down to lift the arm up. So basically, it's hooked into the shoulder pads, as you described, which basically supported the upper arm, and then used the leverage point like here, and use the hand to push down in order to lift the arm up. So
that's how it was for me. Yeah, we had puppet arms, so the handles would jut back past the elbow. So it was, definitely having that fulcrum point in front of it.
The finger controls were on the handle. Yeah.
Yep. It's really heartwarming to know that I made the same choices that they were making for Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, I'm telling you, it did. Yeah. The thing that was wrong with the Wampa was that we made it to work on salt in the studio.
Oh no!
And they, which at least had some grip, because he was on I don't know, 2'6" stilts, which didn't have the movement in them that yours did. They were pretty much just straight stilts. And then they took it out to Norway and expected him to walk on a fjord.
I had the same problem. I actually asked Twitch. I asked Twitch before the contest. I said, "What is the floor going to be while we're actually competing?" So first and foremost, I couldn't get on the stage. So I was 8 feet up, 18-inch stilt, but the ramp off stage was at almost a 40-degree angle.
Wow.
And so it took me just putting one foot on there going, this isn't going to work, guys.
No,
they ended up having me stand offside on the stage for the actual contest. But they had said that the flooring was going to be carpeted. It's like, okay, cool. They're going to put some red carpet or something down. I'm going to have, I will put a treatment on the bottom. So I got some actual like safety. It's like sandpaper essentially for steps. And that was on the bottom side of the actual foot platform. The flooring was polished concrete.
Oh, darn it. Why?
So I was on 18-inch ice skates.
Yeah,
and
you were.
Keep in mind, one eye, so depth perception's already an issue.
Oh God. Oh wow. And honestly, the funny part about that story is that I hear it all the time, where people try to at least get that information beforehand on the stage, but then all of a sudden, last minute they get there and it's just like, oh, cool, they put carpet on the stage.
You ever see the video? I'm taking
the stage.
steps.
The stagehand, the designer who said it's going to be a carpet, didn't talk to the stagehand. I didn't know that at the last minute they couldn't get the materials, and so someone on the ground made a different decision. Something else that Kiki was talking about when she was talking about being small and having to watch out for bulk. That is incredibly true. When you're little, just adding the smallest amount of stuff on your body starts to make you look more and more like a dwarf, because when you are short, you usually, the rest of your body is in proportion. So when you're standing there, you look in proportion. But as soon as you add something on, which can be anything from from shoulder pads to fake boobs. Once you start adding something on, you suddenly end up getting to look shorter and shorter, and people often don't calculate that into their mix. We can't have everybody looking like an Ewok.
Yeah. And that's, I think, why it was interesting when Chad brought it up early in the conversation was proportion. And you're right. Like, I suffer from the same thing as Kiki, where I think the interesting, like, I'm going to use this armor that I'm working on, for example, is just the fact that also for me, not only being short, but a female trying to emulate a taller male character, like thinking about, okay, well, I need to actually proportion my armor in a way where the torso is actually slightly extended on me versus, what it would be on a female or things like that. Like, I think there's just so many rigging things that you have to think about just to make sure that when you get to the judging arena or whatever, that, you don't look like a female in male armor. You want to actually portray the character as accurately as possible. So
I mean, that's a process that a lot of people overlook, though. And if you think on such a simple basis, it's something we as humans have been doing for so long, which is changing the actual silhouette of our appearance, whether it's wearing a corset and binding and all these different processes. And so, case in point with a suit of armor, though, is if you prepare and you plan right, you can actually emphasize certain elements to compensate. Like you said, trying to give the illusion. I have an incredibly long torso. It's stupidly long. I'm a mutant, right? And I have these tiny little hobbit legs. And so for me, it's ironically enough, though, is it actually in costume, if I put a slight lift under my boot or in my feet, it gives me this incredibly long torso, but also long legs, and it's incredibly like over domineering almost, or it adds presence. And so for me, I'm utilizing that oddity of my body type to actually benefit me, though, and that's something that we all really have the capacity to do. It's taking that, or here's another example, though, is the fact that I'm missing an eye. Well, that just means I can do cool stuff with my eye, So
really cool. Yeah, I bet I haven't seen your cable costume, but I'm sure it was incredible. Like,
here, I can solve that issue for you.
There you go. Because I think it's funny when you brought up because you are missing an eye and you chose cable, and I'm like, it's perfect because of course he's missing it. Oh, that's incredible! Look at that arm. Incredible.
Yeah, that's EVA foam. That's EVA foam dowels that have just been one sec. So I actually made a jig and I just set the foam dowels in there, cut them in half, set them in there, and then I had the laser cutter just going zip 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 over and over and over and over, and then just taking them and laying them down. So we'd actually take a lycra arm kind of arm sleeve and draw out the shape of the muscular structure, and then just laying them down in that. And what's so cool about it, though, is because it's flexible, you can actually get it. So when I flex and my muscle is actually expanding, it corresponds, and it actually will translate that motion on the fake muscles too. And that's something that we're like, we hope this works.
Incredible.
Sadly, you can't see the prosthetic because it's on the left side.
It's okay. Have you had, speaking of musculatures, have you had to create any muscle suits at all, Chad? Like, have you had to do that?
No.
Because armor kind of compensates for all that.
Yeah, no, yeah. I've luckily never had to do that because it always looked quite brutal to me.
Yeah.
No, it does.
There was a movie that I made called The Keep, and we built an animatronic. It's a guy who's going through a series of transformations. In fact, he's turning from a spirit into a physical being, and First of all, he's just smoke and nervous system and eyeballs, and then he's this muscle suit, and then he forms into a form that wanders around in a castle and kills Nazis, and it was a weird movie. But anyway, the thing there was that we made a muscle suit that wasn't sculpted muscles in the normal form. We took a lycra suit, an undersuit of lycra that we put on, and then we sculpted each muscle individually, and we put the muscle on in a stretched form, so it was always under pressure. So that meant that when the actor moved his arm inward, the stretched muscle would actually come back into a shorter form, and if he stretched it out further, and these muscles would all interlace with each other, so they would all move through each other. And it was the most successful muscle suit that I ever worked on. I think it was really good, but it was hell for the guy who was inside, because his whole body was being compressed by all these muscles, right? And when you took the costume off, it kind of shrank because all the muscles pulled it in. So it was a kind of screwed up thing until he put his body inside it and stretched it back into the original.
Yeah. Oh man, I bet you he was not. He was a bit sweaty in there.
He was. Well, he wore it well.
That's good.
He was also later on. He was Bib Fortuna, so he was used to being in prosthetics and costumes and other things. And I have to say, I was grateful that he didn't whinge and whine about it.
Yeah.
Incredible.
I actually found the cable neck guy. I'm trying to open it right now. Cross your fingers.
Oh no.
We shall see. But I'm lucky with a lot of the costumes we've done when we have silicone prosthetics. I don't sweat a whole lot, so I'm one of those lucky individuals that can glue stuff off and it not just constantly peeling off. And so I've always felt like I need to do more of that, just because I've been given this one weird quirk.
Yeah.
But it's still something that I've not done nearly as much as I want to.
It's okay. With all the amazing things you're doing, you got time and you got the skill. So
thank you.
So we're pretty much out of time now. We're gonna wrap this up in another 10 minutes. We're gonna just say thank you to both of our guests for a very interesting conversation, and I'm hoping that we're going to get to see you both again somewhere else some other time. We'll talk some more. Do please make sure that you join our group so that we can stay in touch and expand our experiences and our contacts, because ultimately success in any of these industries is about networking and about making the most of all those new contacts that you're making all the time, because you've now got new people that you can reach out to when you've got a problem that you want to solve. Now you've got new people to talk to about them.
I found it.
Oh, that's the cable prosthetic. That's
there
awesome.
we go. So you can see this is the sculpt on my neck, and then this is the extraction of that neck surface area. And then let's see, do I have the negative? There we go. So here
is the negative.
I don't know if I've got the negative. Do I have the negative?
Yeah.
Nice to say, you guys understand the process.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's incredible. I love seeing the process there.
Yeah, but it would in fact be something like this.
Yeah,
that's incredible. And then so you can take those two differences, put them together, and then that'll give you that same injectable prosthetic mold.
Incredible. Love it. It's incredible.
So, thank you, Chad, and I hope that we'll get to talk to you again sometime. I'm sure that you've opened up enough doors for us to think about. And
rabbit hole.
Quite possibly. And Kiki, I'm hoping we're going to see some more of your stuff sometime soon too.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it was our pleasure, right, Cynthia?
Of course, seriously.
And I want to say, Cynthia, you know, thank you for doing a good job here in your role as a co-host. You did good. Yeah. So, Chad, thank you. Goodbye.
Yes, thank you. It was good meeting you guys.
I'll see you again. And Kiki, next time, okay?
Next time. I'll see you again soon, Kiki.
Yeah. So we come down to the two of us. I gotta say thank you for helping me put all of this together, considering that only 2 days ago I thought that it was going to be a complete mess. You know, and I was you know, getting out of my depth. You know, I think it went off really well. And we'll talk about what we're going to do next time sometime soon. And so a virtual hug from me for pulling everything together.
Yeah, I mean, of course. I just want to make sure, I just want to help, because I know you have a lot of administrative work on your plate and things like that, and these are really rough times.
And putting a show like this together, all those images have to be processed.
Yeah, definitely.
And of course, we got to find the talent. So
yeah.
And I really appreciate you for doing that.
Yeah, I really appreciate you allowing me to just help you. Yeah, that's it. That's all I appreciate.
No, you're great, and I'm very lucky to have you on my team. Thank you so much, and I'm going to say goodbye, and I will see you again soon.
So that was basically what we had to say there. I want to thank you for joining us. I'm here now in the museum where we're trying to pay the bills through COVID. If you enjoyed what you saw, please consider becoming one of our patrons. You can do that for as little as $5 a month, and it helps us not only put on these shows, but it helps us too to encourage people to follow their dreams and to think big and not to settle for less just because that's what the neighbors do, or that's what the other people in your class do. You know, it's normal to take your standards from other people. It's normal to want to fit in with the people around you. But never forget that another word for normal is average. And average people get killed in video games. I'll see you again, okay? This is the Yoda Guy, Nick Maley, saying, may the Force expand your horizons always.